Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. It's time for another Vintage 100 Index Hobby Report. Normally, I am joined by Mike, baseball collector, but he has a scheduling conflict. He's really busy with all the different things that he is involved with. So I'm going to be doing this hobby report solo. So let's get right into the analysis for October. Again, we're looking at pricing data from September, but the index itself for October was 1,217.94. The index back in September last month was a revised 1,316.22. The reason why it is revised is based on where vintage card prices, how they update their data. Occasionally, when I update the information for a particular month, I notice that they stick in a new sale right at the end of the previous month, so I do make note of that. In this case, it was revised up from 1,296.98, so it was revised up, but even with that increased revised index, the index for October was down 7.5% from September, which I think follows the general sentiment out there in terms of sports cards, that we're seeing a softening of prices out there. And so I wasn't surprised to see that the index for October was down. Normally, past increases or decreases in the index have been smaller. This one was fairly significant in terms of the monthly change. So for the month of October, we had 37 cards in the index go up in price, sales price. We had 41 cards go down and 22 cards unchanged. So compared to last month, we had the same number of cards go up. For September, 37. We actually had 44 cards go down and 19 cards unchanged. So the fact that there were fewer cards in October going down means that those cards went down more significantly than back in September. So looking at the year to date, since January of this year, in which the index was 1,270.21. For the year, the index is down just over 4%. Since the index started, or the data that we have going back to January of 2019, the index overall is still a fairly healthy 143% increase. So let's go into the more specific data here. And we have the first chart here. This is the entire 100 index, and as you can see, there's been a dip since August. August did see about an 8% increase in the index, and then, as I said, last month was down about 3%, and October was down about 7.5%. So it'll be interesting to see how the last 2 months of the year shake out, to see if that downward trend continues or whether there's any type of leveling off. So as we've been doing for the last several index reports here, we're going to take a look at the decade breakdown of the cards in the index. For the 1940s, which make up 19 cards in the index, you can see for October, fairly even from where it was in September. And again, the general trend since the beginning of 2021, where you started seeing, the really hype up in card prices, it's shown a slow and steady, although be it maybe a little bit volatile, but general upward, slow upward trend that you would normally see in the previous years in 2019, 2020, that slow, gradual progression in price increases. And so you're seeing this a lot in the 1940s cards in the index. Right, for the 1950s, though, has been a little bit more volatile. Again, we've talked about it before. You had that big spike in the first half of 2021. And it has leveled off a bit, but we're looking at the last 2 months going down fairly significantly. And of course, these 28 cards from the 1950s, these are ones that tend to have the highest card values, so they do weigh very heavily on the overall index. But again, you're looking at the index here for the 1950s, where it is in October. You're looking maybe somewhere around July, I think, of 2021, back down to that level. So interesting to see, again, in the next couple months here, the remaining part of the year, to see where the 1950s cards go. You also see a very similar decline in the 1960s cards. Those 29 cards, again, the last 2 months have seen a pretty good decline. Although, again, if you take the trend line back, it's pretty much been even since the beginning of 2021. So the 1960s cards in this index really didn't see that huge spike in early 2021 and just remained fairly level. Again, some rise, some dip, and another rise again in 2022, but coming back down to, again, essentially the 2021 levels. However, for the 1970s, again, these 23 cards, just because of the price compared to the other decades, don't have a lot of impact on the overall index. But for October, we saw a little bit of a rise there in those values of the 1970s cards. But again, looking back at the trend line, we're above where we were at the beginning of 2021. Just a little bit higher than the beginning of this year, fairly stable for those 1970s cards. And so finally, we'll do the combined chart so you can see the impact. The blue line, of course, is the 100 index. That brownish tannish area are the 1950s. And again, you can see the relative strength that the 1950s cards play on the index. You see that go down. You see the cards from the 1960s in yellow bring that index down. But the cards from the 1940s and 1970s helped reduce that overall decline and kept it only at 7.5% for October. All right, last month, we decided to take a look at the 10 highest population cards and see what their values were doing since the beginning of the year. And it turned out that all 10 of the cards that had the highest population, and we figured that cards with the highest population would tend to have more sales volume, more transactions, because there were more cards out there. And so what we decided to do in October was take a look at the 10 lowest population cards and see if there's any comparisons or similarities. And so let's go take a look at the 10 lowest population cards in the index and see how they've done since the beginning of the year. So the first one coming in at number 10 is the 1948 Bowman Enos Slaughter. That has a pop report. Again, this pop data was done as of June. Most likely we'll update it again at the beginning of the year. But the population on this card in a PSA 4 was 110 copies. Year to date, up about a little over 30% since January 19, up over 200%. And you can see the general, you'll see a spike there for this Enos Slaughter card at the beginning of 2021. But prior to that, it was fairly stable. After 2021, you see it decline a little bit, although, again, it is still up year to date about 30%. Number 9 is the 1949 Bowman Duke Snyder. That has a pop report in a PSA 4 of 108. year to date up 75%, and since January up just under 100%. Now compared to the Enos Slaughter here had some fairly active sales volume for a Pop 110 card, but the Duke Snider, which essentially has around the same pop, for whatever reason, there aren't too many sales historically for this card. And I've noticed myself in going after certain cards that don't get graded a lot. They're Hall of Famers. A couple 1978 manager cards, for example, that Hall of Fame managers that I've been going after, low pop, and when you do see one enter the market, there's typically a big demand for it. So that may be what happened here toward the end of 2022. One came on the market, and maybe there was a buying, competitive bidding to purchase that. Okay, next we have the 1949 Bowman Gil Hodges. This has a pop of a PSA 4, or in a PSA 4 of 108. Year to date, up almost 150% since January 2019, up over 255%. Again, this card got a big bump in 2021, I believe, with his election to the Hall of Fame. You can see not much action in his card prior to that. Whenever you see prices here like this, pretty much in an even line, that means there were no new sales for that card. So not too much activity prior to his Hall of Fame induction. And then, of course, you can see a much higher demand and higher prices for this 1949 Bowman rookie card of Gil Hodges. All right, now at number 7, we have the 1948 Bowman Red Shandiest rookie card. The pop here in a PSA 4 is only 98. This card actually year to date is down about 17%. Since 2019, only up about 30% for this Hall of Fame rookie card. Again, not maybe one of the more popular Hall of Famers outside of the St. Louis area, of course. But actually for a pop under 100, there's been a quite good number of activity, sales volume for this card in a PSA 4. You can see it did, this one did get affected by the early run-up in prices there in 2021, and has gone back down. And yeah, one of the few cards in the top 10 here that have gone down for the low population cards. Right, at number 6, we have the 1952 Topps Eddie Matthews rookie card, population of only 97 in a PSA 5. Again, we're looking at the collector grade here, so the cards from the 40s are in a PSA 4, 50s are in a 5, 60s in a 6, and so on. So population of 97 year to date, up 45%, and since the beginning of January, up 59%. Again, fairly decent sales volume. You have this time period here between, I would say, maybe middle of 2019 all the way through almost the middle of 2020, where there wasn't a single card that was sold in a PSA 5, and then for whatever reason you started getting more examples being sold. A few months there where there hadn't been one, but for the last couple months there was a little bit of sales activity. So number 5, we have the 1949 Bowman Richie Ashburn, population of 96. This card year to date's up about 26% since January of 2019, up 150%. Again, not a lot of sales volume for this 49 Bowman Richie Ashburn, but it does show a general trend going up over the time period here. You saw that spike in early 2021, and if anything, that card has gone up since that spike. So one of the few cards that has maintained that high level that was reached back in the spike of prices, and has gone up even more since then. And again, it could very well be due to the fairly low population of those PSA 4s. Number 4, we have the 1949 Bowman Larry Doby rookie card, population of 91 in a PSA 4. Year to date, unchanged. You can see there was no sales since about, looks maybe August of 2021. There's not been at least in terms of the data that Vintage Card Prices gathers, there hasn't been a sale of a PSA 4 Larry Doby since it looks like either June or July of 2021. And of course, you did see that spike there, I believe, just like the Gil Hodges. I believe Larry Doby was elected to the Hall of Fame last year. So you did see a spike there. But even prior to, there wasn't a whole lot of sales volume for this 49 Bowman Larry Doby. All right, at number 3, we have the 1952 Topps Hoyt Wilhelm. In a PSA 5, there were only 82 copies. Year to date, this is the second card in the top 10 here that actually is down year to date, down 39%. But since January of 2019, up 218%. And again, prior to that 2021 period, not many sales for this particular card, but since then there has been a little volume. Again, not a whole lot because of the low population, but it peaked here in late 2021. There wasn't another sale then until looks like maybe May of this year, and then just 2 other sales that were up and down for this card. So all these cards here with these low populations just have interesting trends to them. All depends on how many of these cards actually come up for sale at any given point in time. Number 2, we have the 1949 Bowman Bob Lemon. Population of only 76 in a PSA 4. Year to date, up slightly, and that is due to a sale that took place in October. As you can see here, several months, pretty much looks like a little over a year, that there was not a single sale reported of a PSA 4 Bob Lemon 49 Bowman. So that last sale that took place in October actually put it up for the year to date. Again, you saw a spike here instead of in 2021 where most of the spikes were taking place. This one had a spike in 2020. I'm not sure. I should have looked when Bob Lemon was inducted into the Hall of Fame. It could have been in 2020. Which may have caused that increase there. Again, even prior to that, though, there was not much activity, so it could have been a case of, again, you had a Hall of Famer rookie card that there were a few that started to enter for, come up for sale, and the demand for those that have been wanting that card, maybe in that condition, that price point, started, the demand for it went high. More competition generally means a higher sales price, but has come down a little bit since that high back in late 2020. And then the number 1 lowest population card in the 100 index is actually the 1950 Bowman Don Newcomb. Now he's not a Hall of Famer, but I had added this card into the index just because I just love the image of that 1950 Bowman card of Don Newcomb. It is his rookie card, but in a PSA 5 there were only 65 copies. Year to date unchanged because there has not been a single sale of a PSA 5 Don Newcomb since January of 2021. We're approaching 2 years since a PSA 5 has been put up for sale. And even prior to that, there was another, looks like even longer, over a year, that one was sold. What was interesting here is you had a little bit of activity back in early 2019. Then there was a copy that sold for $150. Then another one, probably due to condition, sold for under $100. And then the next sale was right back up at $150. So this card, in terms of maintaining value, this is a perfect example of a card that, despite fluctuations with prices over the last 3 years, it's definitely held its value right there at $150. So very interesting. Some of these charts, some of these price fluctuations. Again, one of the takeaways here, and again, final thoughts and takeaways of the index here, you have a situation where, from last month's analysis of the highest population cards in the index, again, a lot more volume, which would tend to, and again, all those 10 cards that were the highest population were down year to date. So the rationale, at least in my mind, is that the cards that have the more activity in terms of sales volume may be impacted more by market trends in the hobby in terms of sales prices. You get your highs, your lows, your in-betweens, but in this month, I think it showed that for the low population cards, especially for ones that don't enter, aren't put for sale that often, sometimes you get big spikes in the prices of those cards because, again, people have them probably on their wish list of, hey, man, as soon as I see one, I really want to go after it. And then you get that competition. More demand generally means with a given supply, if you have that one card that's put up for sale and you have multiple people that say, hey, one finally came up, I want to go after it, tends to push the price up a little bit. So would love to know your thoughts in the comments of the data here for October. What are your thoughts of how this index is going to perform for the last 2 months of 2022? If I had to place a bet, I would see this index as a whole probably still seeing some softening down a little bit. I don't think we're going to see these 7.5% decreases for each of the next 2 months. But I think I would not be surprised if the index does fall 2 more times here by the end of the year. So before I wrap things up, if you haven't checked out my latest video, I just reached 1,000 subscribers, so I'm doing a contest, so definitely go check this video out over here. Yeah, that's all I have for you. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.